The news didn't break with a press conference or a dramatic tweet. It came as a leak, quietly, through a single anonymous source late on a Sunday night. A White House executive directive, classified and marked immediate, had been circulated among top federal agencies. The document was clear. All federal collaborations with Elon Musk's companies, SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, and even Starlink, were to be paused indefinitely pending national security reassessment. No explanation. No warning. By dawn, half of Washington was whispering. By noon, the world was roaring. Inside a glass conference room at Tesla's Palo Alto headquarters, Elon Musk sat in silence. The news alert flickered across the curved display embedded in the table. Around him, a dozen of his closest executives stared at their tablets, waiting for a reaction. Elon didn't blink. He just kept reading the memo. A soft hum came from the wall behind him. The neural interface panel was still compiling data from the latest brainwave tests. Outside the window, the sun had barely risen, casting a pale light over the charging fields of Model X prototypes. But inside, time felt frozen. One of his aides finally spoke. "Elon, it's confirmed. Multiple agencies. They're pulling out." Musk slowly pushed his chair back, stood, and walked to the window. His voice, when it came, was calm. "They waited until a weekend. They wanted me to wake up to war." His chief legal advisor, a woman who had helped him navigate dozens of governmental storms, leaned forward. "We need to respond carefully. If this is about the AI protocols—" "It's not about AI," Elon interrupted, turning around. "It's about control." There was a pause. Across the country, major news outlets were already speculating. Was Musk being targeted for his refusal to censor Starlink traffic during geopolitical conflicts? Was Neuralink's latest data-sharing deal with independent researchers the trigger? Or had his quiet meetings with European space agencies finally crossed a line? None of it mattered yet. What mattered now was the optics. "Elon, should we go public?" asked another voice. "Say it's political sabotage." Musk didn't answer immediately. He stared out at the brightening sky. Planes lifting off in the distance, satellites already streaking overhead. The same satellites they now wanted to sever from government contracts. The same networks that powered hospitals, first responders, and schools in remote parts of the world. "No," he said finally. "We don't play defense." Another pause. "Then what do we do?" Elon turned to face them all, his eyes sharp, unwavering. "We build something they can't ban." The White House's decision had triggered ripples far beyond Washington. In Silicon Valley, tech leaders held private calls into the early hours, some in quiet support of Musk, others cautiously silent. On Wall Street, Tesla's stock dipped, then held, investors uncertain whether this was a disaster or just another Musk moment that would end with him somehow winning. But inside a low-lit room in a former rocket testing bunker in Texas, something else was happening. Elon Musk was already building his counterattack. The room wasn't large, a war room in name only, but the energy inside was electric. A map of Starlink nodes pulsed in blue on a wall-to-wall monitor. A digital globe rotated slowly, red pins marking government-licensed satellite gateways now at risk. Around a metal table sat 12 people: engineers, physicists, data ethicists. These weren't executives. They were the Whisper Team, a codename only a handful inside SpaceX even knew existed. "Are we activating the fork?" asked Maya, a systems architect whose code helped build the secure lattice architecture for private satellite routing. Elon nodded. "Not yet, but we prepare for it." The fork, a decentralized protocol allowing Starlink to route around state-controlled traffic gates, had been in development for years. Originally designed for emergency situations in authoritarian regions, it had never been deployed in the West. Until now, it had been a hypothetical. A quiet rebellion in code. What if they come after licensing next? Someone asked. Spectrum allocation, orbital permissions. They will, Elon said without blinking. They're going to make this about rules. But this isn't about rules. It's about dependency. The room quieted. For years, the U.S. government had quietly relied on Musk. For launch capacity, for rapid response satellites, for encrypted emergency communication. Now, they were trying to cut him off. But the deeper truth was this. They couldn't function without him. They just didn't want to admit it anymore. We need to go international, Elon continued. Decentralize operations, move AI node hosting offshore. That includes WhisperNet. WhisperNet, a private mesh network Musk had been developing in parallel to Starlink. Smaller, deniable, community-powered. It was designed to give connectivity to people no matter what governments decided. It wasn't a product, it was a principle. They'll accuse us of going rogue, Maya said. They already have, he replied. Now we prove why they were afraid in the first place. The atmosphere shifted, no longer reactive. This was strategy now. On the monitor, a message appeared in white text over blue static. Greater than Stage 1 prepared. Awaiting your command. Elon didn't smile. He didn't blink. He just leaned forward and typed 2 words. Proceed quietly. At 3:12 a.m., an envelope was left at the back entrance of the Eisenhower Executive Office building, just behind the White House West Wing. No return address, no fingerprints, just a cream-white envelope sealed with a black wax insignia no one in the mailroom recognized. A falcon diving with a lightning bolt in its talon. By 6 a.m., it had reached a special assistant to the National Security Advisor. At 6:23, the envelope had been scanned, documented, and flagged non-urgent. But by 7:07, that label was revoked. Because someone finally read what was inside. There was no signature. But there didn't need to be. The letter was unmistakably from Elon Musk. Inside were only 3 paragraphs. The tone was measured, the language almost cold in its precision, not angry, not defensive. It was a strategic notification, something between a warning and a confession. Musk didn't demand reversal of the ban. He didn't beg for clarity. Instead, he detailed the exact number of governmental contracts his technologies currently supported. He outlined 14 infrastructure systems, including rural medical comms, wildfire tracking via satellite, secure broadband for emergency services, all relying on SpaceX and Starlink. And then came the last line. Simple, sharp, unforgettable. If I'm to be treated as a threat, then your systems should no longer depend on me. Separation must be mutual. When National Security Advisor Everett Knox read the letter, his hand visibly tightened around the page. Is he bluffing? One of his aides asked. No, Knox replied. He's drawing a line. By 10:15 a.m., an emergency meeting was called at the White House Situation Room. It wasn't about military action, but the tone was eerily similar. Slides were shown with red warning markers, critical systems that could fail if Musk pulled the plug. Officials debated whether the president should speak to him directly. Others warned it would make the administration look weak. In Palo Alto, Elon stood barefoot in his living room, watching the live news feed scroll headlines across the screen. Musk responds to White House action with thinly veiled warning. Separation must be mutual. What did he mean? Markets react to possible infrastructure shutdown. Across the room, X, his young son, sat building a tower with magnetic tiles. He didn't look up as he spoke. Are they scared of you now? Elon turned, his voice quieter than usual. They're scared of what happens if they don't understand the future. X nodded. Then maybe you should teach them. Elon didn't answer right away. He watched the tiles, one by one, fall into place, building higher. The stronger the foundation, the harder it was to knock down. He turned back to the screen, but his mind was already elsewhere. Because now, the counterplay had begun. The studio lights were dimmed just slightly, enough to create atmosphere, but not so much that the tension disappeared. The walls were paneled in sleek carbon black, the kind of visual aesthetic Musk favored. Minimalist, modern, and unnervingly calm. At the center of the room stood a single glass desk, and behind it, Elon Musk. This wasn't a press conference. This was a signal. The stream had been announced only 2 hours prior through a single X post. Some things are better said plainly. Live stream in 2 hours. No edits. No handlers. Over 41 million people tuned in. No mainstream networks were invited. No moderators. No script. Just Elon, sitting calmly under white lights and looking directly into the camera. Not the way a politician does, but the way a coder does when testing, if the algorithm still responds. I've always believed the future should be built by the curious, not the fearful, he began, his tone level. But when power becomes afraid of tools it no longer understands, it reacts with suppression. There was no anger in his voice, just a kind of razor-sharp clarity. He spoke for 7 minutes. He explained, line by line, what Starlink supported. Hospitals, farmers, students in remote corners of the world. He described how SpaceX had launched payloads no government would risk. He reminded the audience, without boasting, how NASA depended on Falcon rockets now more than ever. Then came the final message. I don't seek conflict, but I won't allow innovation to be caged by politics. If governments ban the builders, they better have backup plans for the bridges they've been walking on. And then, without fanfare, he ended the stream. There was no outro, no music, no applause, just silence. And the internet caught fire. Clips of the statement hit every major social platform within minutes. Hashtags exploded. Are Musk banned? Raj build without permission. Separation must be mutual. Even prominent critics admitted the broadcast had power. Not because of the content, but because of the tone. Controlled, calculated, unshaken. In Washington, the press secretary dodged questions. In Silicon Valley, engineers whispered that Musk had just redefined what a CEO looked like in an age of tech-state conflict. And in a quiet room in Houston, an aging systems analyst who once helped launch Apollo 11 watched from his home and muttered under his breath, "This is no longer just about rockets. This is about who gets to write the rules of reality." The day after Elon's live stream, the map of world influence didn't change, but the conversations behind closed doors did. In Berlin, Chancellor Neumann summoned her tech advisor at 6 a.m. sharp. "Is it true?" she asked. "Yes," the advisor replied. "Starlink supports more of our critical systems than NATO realizes." In Tokyo, a quiet meeting was held between the Ministry of Defense and 2 aerospace officials from SoftTech, the private Japanese space firm partially partnered with SpaceX. They didn't say Musk's name, but every line on the whiteboard pointed to one fact. If the U.S. lets go of him, someone else will pick him up. And in Beijing, President Liu watched the full recording of Musk's message with unblinking eyes. When it ended, he turned to his inner circle and said, "Americans punish the mind that makes the tools. Let's see if the tools want a new home." Meanwhile, at the United Nations, speculation began to swirl. Was Musk planning to establish a post-national tech alliance? Could a single CEO hold more infrastructure leverage than an entire G7 bloc? These questions, once hypothetical, now felt like logistical possibilities. Back in the U.S., White House advisors were split. Some believed Musk had gone rogue and must be treated like a foreign adversary. Others warned, "You don't start a war with the man who owns the satellites that carry your military's comms." Public sentiment was even more volatile. Half the country now saw Musk not just as a tech leader, but as a whistleblower, someone speaking truth to decaying power. The other half feared he was becoming too powerful, too unaccountable, a sovereign without a state. At Tesla headquarters in Austin, reporters swarmed the gates, but inside, Musk wasn't giving statements. He was building a new war room. The SpaceX command floor had been repurposed, large screens tracking global reactions, data flow on political sentiment, infrastructure stress levels, and emerging alliances. Beside Elon, a whiteboard titled Phase 2 had 4 bullet points. 1. Stabilize Starlink dependencies across non-US regions. 2. Open secure communication channels with neutral governments. 3. Decentralize server control nodes. 4. Launch Project Helix. Only a few knew what Helix was. None of them worked for any government. Later that night, Elon walked outside alone. No cameras, no speeches, just the Texas wind and a sky full of the very satellites Washington now feared. He whispered to himself, "They built systems on me, and now they're afraid I can see their code." They called it Project Helix, but even among Musk's most trusted engineers, very few knew what it actually did. The name first appeared on a locked internal dashboard 3 months before the White House ban. At the time, most assumed it was a new propulsion architecture or deep space telemetry system. But it wasn't listed under SpaceX, or Tesla, or Neuralink. It belonged to none of Musk's known companies. And that's what made it different. In a sealed underground facility just outside Austin, shielded by biometric locks, signal scramblers, and 4 non-disclosure protocols, Musk stood in front of a digital simulation looping across 3 8K panels. It wasn't a map. It wasn't code. It was a living model of the world's entire information ecosystem. Every telecom node, satellite relay, data choke point, and power distribution hub. And at its center, a self-learning AI engine trained not to disrupt, but to redirect. Helix doesn't shut things down, Musk explained to his team of 12 hand-picked minds. It re-architects dependency without triggering alarms. The goal wasn't sabotage, it was sovereignty. With Helix, any entity, government, NGO, or independent community could instantly migrate core infrastructure off compromised channels and onto encrypted Musk-owned networks. Education grids, medical platforms, public internet backbones. It was the fail-safe for when politics failed innovation. One of his advisors, a former NSA analyst, voiced the obvious. "You realize, if this gets out, they'll accuse you of building a shadow internet." Musk didn't flinch. "They already think that. I'd rather they accuse me of it and be right than accuse me of nothing and lose everything." As the news of Project Helix leaked weeks later, first through anonymous files, then picked up by rogue journalists, the public was split. Was this a visionary's answer to digital authoritarianism, or the first step toward corporate rule over information? Musk remained silent. No tweet, no post. Instead, he activated Phase 1. In Kenya, where government systems had collapsed due to cyber attacks, Helix quietly rerouted hospital communications through encrypted mesh satellites. In Eastern Europe, a group of underground educators received free access to a custom Helix relay node, allowing students to stream science content despite a regional blackout. In Washington, The National Security Council watched in disbelief. The system was moving faster than regulation. By the time officials reacted, the dependencies had already shifted. One senator called it the most advanced private digital coup in human history. Another called it the only lifeboat we didn't build ourselves. Meanwhile, in that same underground lab, Musk stared at a blinking line of code. Dependency is the lever of modern power. Let's rewrite the fulcrum. The room was quiet. His engineers looked to him, and Musk calmly said, "The question isn't whether they'll come after us. It's whether they'll still matter when they do." The American media didn't know how to handle Project Helix. Major outlets first ignored it, then dismissed it, then debated its legality on split screens filled with former officials, cybersecurity professors, and political analysts. But by the third day, even they couldn't deny what was happening. Entire regions were switching off government systems and logging into Musk's invisible infrastructure. The shift was subtle, but global. In Argentina, a community health center reconnected its patient records after 6 months offline, thanks to a Helix satellite drop. In Vietnam, journalists under digital surveillance uploaded encrypted content using Helix proxies without alerting their censors. In Ukraine, students from bombed-out schools rejoined their virtual classrooms through a mesh connection they simply called Elon's signal. And in Washington, D.C., Senator Clarence Whitman stood on the Senate floor holding a printed screenshot of the Helix code header yelling, "This is not a service. This is a coup d'etat with Wi-Fi." But outside the Capitol, the narrative was changing. A viral TikTok posted by a teacher in rural Idaho showed her classroom regaining stable internet for the first time in 3 semesters. The caption read, "The government left us buffering. Elon didn't." Musk still hadn't spoken publicly, but the silence was louder than any press conference. Inside Tesla HQ, his communications team received thousands of messages per hour. Activists, students, refugee camps, independent governments, all requesting access. They didn't want an ideology. They wanted functionality. And for the first time, it seemed Musk had built something bigger than even his critics feared. A global population that no longer needed permission to connect. Meanwhile, the U.S. administration scrambled. The Department of Justice opened a quiet inquiry into unregulated network expansion, while the FCC attempted to issue a cease and desist on Helix nodes operating within U.S. borders. The documents leaked within an hour, triggering global ridicule. In a leaked internal memo, one Pentagon advisor wrote, "We spent decades trying to dominate the cloud. He just handed it out like oxygen." Late one night, in a low-lit conference room inside SpaceX's secondary control center, Elon sat with a single Helix engineer. No screens, no data, just 2 chairs and a whiteboard. "What happens?" Musk asked slowly, "if we succeed?" The engineer didn't answer at first, then simply said, "We reset what it means to be a citizen." There was no applause, just quiet understanding. At that very moment, in Nairobi, a 10-year-old girl typed her first line of code on a device powered by Helix. In a world where nations debated regulations and monopolies, a new reality was forming, not from votes or borders, but from quiet access. One terminal at a time. They say every empire has its tipping point. For Washington, it wasn't war. It wasn't a foreign threat. It was a man who gave people a signal they didn't have to ask for. Behind closed doors, the U.S. government escalated. On the surface, press briefings remained neutral, calling Helix a matter under review. But inside the Situation Room, a task force called Continuity Shield had been activated. Its mission: contain the spread of Musk's networks before they reached full integration. The tools? legal chokeholds, financial audits, and most disturbingly, personal pressure. First, Neuralink's pending research approvals were suspended by the FDA for procedural review. Next, SEC investigators reopened decade-old filings related to Tesla's early solar subsidies. Then came the unspoken move, a federal request to subpoena private correspondences between Musk and foreign tech ministries, something unheard of for a civilian entrepreneur. The message was clear: back down, or we dig until you break. But Elon didn't respond with lawyers or press releases. He responded with a signal. One morning, without announcement, every Helix-connected node displayed a single message in 42 languages. You are not renting this system. You are inheriting it. Build wisely. It was the most downloaded image on the internet for 2 straight days. But back in D.C., the pressure intensified. Not just on Musk, but on those around him. A former Tesla board member's home was raided on suspicion of foreign asset concealment. A SpaceX contractor in Romania was detained for questioning. Even a retired Starlink technician found his bank accounts frozen pending international wire anomalies. And then came the moment Musk had been bracing for. An insider flipped. A senior systems architect at Helix HQ leaked fragments of the core protocol to a defense-backed think tank. The headlines the next day screamed, "Helix code linked to foreign military standards. Is Musk engineering global infrastructure for sale?" The White House didn't confirm or deny. They didn't have to. The narrative had shifted. Musk was no longer just a rogue genius. He was being painted as a threat to national sovereignty. Inside one of the hidden Helix control hubs, disguised as a fiber optics lab in Nevada, Musk stood with his lead ethics advisor, a former UN diplomat. "They're trying to reframe the question," she said quietly. "Not, is Helix helping people? But, who does it help too much?" Elon stared at a holographic globe slowly spinning, points of light pulsing across continents. "They want to control infrastructure," he murmured. "I want to remove the need for it." That night, in a small school in Estonia, children completed their first AI class on Helix. And in the Pentagon, a general whispered into his phone, "If we don't unplug this man, he'll rewrite the Constitution without ever entering the building." Elon Musk had built his empire on control, of systems, of schedules, of vision. But now, as pressure mounted from governments and betrayal leaked from within, the one thing he couldn't control was the erosion of trust. People close to him were disappearing. A longtime SpaceX project lead resigned with no explanation. Neuralink's lead neuroengineer accepted a quiet advisory role at DARPA. Even his personal pilot of 10 years submitted his notice. No press, no confrontation, just silence. In Washington, officials kept their voices measured, but the shadow campaign was in full swing. Helix nodes in 5 countries had been blacklisted overnight. A European summit released a joint statement questioning the sovereignty implications of privatized infrastructure. The phrase digital colonialism started trending, pushed by influencers sponsored by known lobbying firms. But inside the core Helix team, a different kind of shift was happening. Elon gathered a small circle: engineers, ethicists, cryptographers, and 2 teenage prodigies from the Middle East and Brazil who had reverse-engineered Helix protocols on their own. They met in an unmarked Tesla battery facility in the Nevada desert. The plan Musk laid out wasn't just technical, it was philosophical. "We need to separate Helix from me," he said, pacing in front of a chalkboard full of code and quotes. "They've turned me into the threat. Fine. Let them ban Elon Musk. But they can't ban an idea that belongs to everyone." He called it Code Exodus. The core principle: decentralize Helix beyond even his control. Break the last link. Turn it into something that couldn't be shut down. Not by the US government, not by Musk himself. A self-propagating encrypted mesh network seeded globally, built to be forked, rebuilt, localized, and made indistinguishable from native infrastructure. And then, he'd walk away from it. At first, his team resisted. What if it collapsed? What if bad actors hijacked it? Musk replied only with a whiteboard sketch. A quote scribbled underneath: "The most dangerous tool is the one you can never take back." That's why it has to belong to everyone at once. It took 4 weeks of non-stop engineering. Data vaults were duplicated. DNS protocols were restructured. An AI-driven guardian node, named Eva, was trained on one rule: ensure access, never allegiance. When the day came, Musk uploaded a single update to a Helix mirror node in Argentina. The log entry simply read, "Exodus committed. Ownership dissolved." And then, for the first time, he shut down his access. Helix was now a ghost system, everywhere and nowhere. He stood alone on the roof of the facility, Nevada winds tearing through his coat. There was no ceremony, no press, just the quiet knowledge that he had removed himself from the very thing they wanted to use against him. Back in D.C., the White House tried to respond, but by then, it was too late. No central switch, no jurisdiction, no legal name. One advisor said it best during an emergency debrief: "We tried to take his toy away, so he broke it into 1,000 pieces and gave one to everyone." The world didn't collapse when Elon Musk vanished from the Helix system, but it changed. Quietly. Permanently. Weeks passed. Governments attempted to reconstruct the core code of Helix, but found only derivatives, forked networks, local variants, all built atop the same irreversible base Musk had relinquished. There were no central servers to seize, no master key to revoke, no individual to bribe, subpoena, or silence. Musk had done the unthinkable. He had made himself irrelevant to his own creation. And for the first time, people began to trust it more. In Nairobi, a child used a Helix AI to rebuild a school's water filter system. In Reykjavik, a hospital integrated its own version of Helix into patient triage, cutting ER wait times in half. In Bangkok, teenagers began writing ethics protocols for Helix nodes to adapt to their local culture, language, and needs. And in the US, something stranger happened: silence from the White House. Musk had removed the target from his back by removing himself. Until one day, 3 weeks after Exodus, Elon Musk appeared again. This time, not on X, not in an interview, but in a small hall in Austin, Texas, where a local college had invited him for a public lecture titled, "When You No Longer Own the Future." He wore no tie, no branding, just a gray hoodie and a tired smile. "People think I gave something up," he said, standing before a chalkboard. "They're wrong. I just stopped trying to keep it." He told the crowd that ideas cannot be both global and controlled, that true infrastructure isn't cables or satellites, but consent, trust, collaboration. "I was banned from a building," he said, referencing the White House. "But the future isn't a room you enter. It's a direction you walk in." The hall was quiet. No media frenzy. Just scattered applause and the click of notebooks closing. The next day, the transcript of his talk, recorded by a student on a cracked phone, was translated into 108 languages and downloaded by nearly 70 million people. One excerpt went viral. "They asked me to choose, control or contribution. I chose to disappear inside the contribution." Elon returned home that night to a dim house and the sound of his son playing the piano. He didn't check trending hashtags. He didn't review data logs. He just listened, and in that stillness, the quiet hum of a world moving forward without him, he realized something no data set had ever shown him before. Maybe the loudest signal he had ever sent was walking away. Elon Musk didn't lose control. He gave it up, on purpose. Not to retreat, but to let something bigger rise. The White House tried to ban a man, but instead, they fueled a movement. And the world, without waiting, simply kept going.